The Power Moms Network, empowering moms to lift the world.
Welcome. I'm Riley Karsh.
I'm Tova Kopan.
We are thrilled to bring you the We Go Boldly podcast.
Let's talk big burning questions, life changes, and maybe a bit of personal business.
Let's be bold and brave together. Are you ready?
I am. Here comes the show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to We Go Boldly, the podcast where we celebrate women stepping into their power and living their most authentic lives. We are also thrilled to be a part of the Power Moms Network. At Power Moms Network, we are empowering moms and creating a community of mothers mentoring other moms to greatness. I have said that so many times and I stumble over it every time. I'm sorry, everyone. I'll get it one of these days. Power Moms Network is a very cool place. Please come check us out online. We would love to have you join us there. And it's season 12, as you all know, and we are talking about self-authorship, and we are back into interviews. I'm very excited about our guests today. Before we get to her, though, let me get Tova on the show and see what's happening in her world today. How are you, Tova? What's going on?
Let's see. Well, it looks like the sun is, I know you all love my daily weather updates. It looks like the sun is starting to peek out, which is great because we haven't seen it for a couple days.
Mm-hmm.
I don't mind the rain. It was more like all weekend. It was like, is it gonna rain? Maybe it won't rain. But we are one weekend into multi-sport season. So yeah, we did it. We
You made
did.
it.
We made it.
Yeah.
We're all still smiling.
We haven't started games yet, thankfully, but we're still in, we have sports and arts going on
Yeah.
a lot, and figuring out how to get two kids to two different places when there's one me is very challenging.
Oh,
Um,
real fast. Just speaking of arts, I just have to shout out my 11-year-old. He was in the Music Man. He was Constable Locke, and this was a trial, the whole experience until the end, really, because, well, no, I mean, literally the day he was supposed to go and the first time he was going to put like makeup on, he was like, no. But, he wanted to do it kind of until he realized he needed to audition. And then he wanted to do it until he realized he needed to audition and sing. And then he wasn't enjoying practices until he had this one great practice where it all kind of came together. But I don't know if I don't think it'll embarrass him because we did have a talk last night about how brave he was because at the end, he was so sad it was over that as we were taking pictures and he was smiling, he had these massive tears.
yeah,
And I kept going like, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" And my older son is like, "Is he okay?" And last night I apologized. I said, because I know I was annoying. And I said, "I've never seen you allow yourself to have such a strong emotion. And I'm so proud of you. And I promise next time I'll only do one, are you okay? And then if you tell me, I'll believe you." But it was amazing. You
yeah,
were so brave to let yourself feel that. And it was awesome. I asked him, I said, "See, and you said you had stage fright." And he goes, "Oh, I still do. I just do it anyway." And it was awesome.
yeah.
So
That's fantastic. I love it.
yeah. Anyway,
Um, let's dive into our episode for today. Before we introduce our guests, I just want to remind everyone we have our weekly women's circle. We would love for you to join us. It is a place where we all come together once a week, and sometimes we just vent. So sometimes, well, not just. Sometimes we vent.
yeah.
Sometimes we support each other. Sometimes we talk more in depth about the podcast topics. We kind of run the gamut. All together, though, it is a place of support and community, and where you can, as we're talking about all this season long, bring your whole self to the table and be who you are, let your weird out, whatever it is. And we would love to have you. So you can find more info about that at goboldlyinitiative.com/weekly circle. Join us there. It is my favorite hour of the week. So all of that being said, I'm going to turn it over to you, Tova, to introduce our guest.
Yeah, and I am so excited to introduce our guest. I learned about her from a good friend when I was visiting Tennessee last year, and she said, you have to meet this person. I have to introduce you because she's amazing and she's taking, I don't know, the world by storm. And our guest today is Allie Phillips. At just 30 years old, Allie was faced with one of the most devastating challenges of reproductive care. At 20 weeks pregnant, she was told her pregnancy was no longer viable and her health was at risk. And she was unable to obtain an abortion in Tennessee. She was forced to flee her state to receive the much needed life saving care. And she has since joined a lawsuit against the state of Tennessee, testified in front of the US Senate, and ran one of the strongest campaigns for the Tennessee State House last year, which was amazing. And she was just recently elected to be a new chair of her county Democratic Party, where she continues to fight for justice for all. We are so excited to have you join us. So, welcome, Allie. Thank you for joining us. How are you doing?
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm doing really well as you can at almost 36 weeks pregnant. Lots of lack of sleep and everything aches, but that's okay. I'm still pushing forward. We're almost to the end.
I remember it was a long time ago, but I remember it was not a comfortable period of time physically. Well, welcome to the show. We are thrilled you're with us. Tova and I know have both been following you on like Instagram and all the places and all the things you're doing. And I before we dive into the questions, I just want to say I really appreciate the voice you're bringing to topics that are really hard and painful and challenging, and the way in which you are standing up, maybe not fearlessly, but standing up anyway, um, for people and women and humans and like just general the right things to do. So I appreciate that so much. It's great. It's inspirational to follow along with. We do want to ask you, um, we're going to wind the clock back a little bit for you, and we want to ask you about, your story and how you are in charge of it and the ways in which you are writing your own future and writing your own story and who you are and want to be and all of that stuff. So we want to start with sort of taking the Wayback Machine and asking you, back way back when, before sort of all of this happened in your life, did you develop a vision for your future? Was it something that you thought about consciously, like, 5-year plans, values-based purpose, any of that stuff? Is that stuff you spent time thinking about?
Before all of this happened, as far as like politics goes, I was not a political person. Never thought I would run for office, never thought I'd be a quote unquote activist, organizer, any of that. That just wasn't something I thought I fit into. I voted in presidential elections, and that was about it. Like I couldn't tell you who my state rep was. I didn't know there was city council members, all of that. Like had no clue, was completely disconnected. As far as like planning out my future, I feel like everybody kind of has like this, oh yeah, one day I would like to do this or I'd like to do that. And for me, there was nothing really set in stone. I became a single mom at the age of 22. And when my daughter was a baby, I was working 3 jobs while going to college full time. I graduated in 2017, got my bachelor's degree, and I got my degree in multimedia journalism. My goal when I went to college was to become a reporter. I wanted to be in the news. I love storytelling. And after having my daughter and being a single mom, it kind of got derailed a little bit. I wasn't able to focus on that career goal dream like I wanted to. And so I just kind of shifted into do what you need to do to take care of you and your baby. And that's kind of where I sat. It was just survive, keep your kid alive, and get through day by day. And I guess my goal in life at that point was just to be the best mom that I could be. I didn't really have specific goals for myself anymore because it was no longer about me. And so that's where I was. That's where I was at before all of this happened, was just exist, work, pay my bills, and be a good mom.
what made you, I know you said you wanted to be like a reporter. What was it about that in like, so, back when that was your dream, what was it about it that you found interesting or exciting or made you want that to be your major in college?
So going through like middle and high school, I would have these like creative writing classes and they would give prompts like a first sentence, right? And then you have to write 5 pages of a story after they give you that first sentence. And I was always the one that first I would have the most like in-depth, detailed story from the prompt, but I enjoyed it the most out of everybody in my class. And I think maybe it just comes from being able to be having that imagination, being able to create characters. There was actually, I think it was eighth or ninth grade year. It was my English class, and we were supposed to write a short story about anything. And I remember the title of the story, and I wish I had it still, but I titled it Drunken Forest. And I turned it in to, get my grade, and I got, a perfect score on it. And my teacher actually pulled me aside and said, "Have you ever thought about publishing this short story?" And I was like, "No, why would I do that?" And he was like, "Because this is really good." And so it just kind of like boosted that little, creative juices that I had. And so I continued to write in a journal that I have in my room. I would write these short stories. I haven't wrote any in a while, but I would just continue to write short stories that would just come to my head. And so I also grew up watching the news, specifically News Channel 5 here in Nashville. And I was like, I want to be a reporter. I want to be an anchor. I want to be the person that tells everybody the news. And specifically, I had a really weird interest in like celebrity news. I don't know why. I was just like, oh, I really want to talk about Justin Bieber every day. That would be like the perfect job.
Yeah. I feel
um,
like you and many, many other teen girls probably at that
yes.
time probably had that same thought.
Yes. And I was like, I was living for it. I was like, I want to talk about Justin Bieber, the Selena Gomez drama, which is right back, in the
Yeah.
media right now, and I'm living for it. But as I got older, I was like, oh, that's pretty like juvenile. Celebrities, I don't want to waste my life talking about them every day. They already have a big enough platform. They don't need me to talk about them. And so then I shifted more towards like local news. And I was like, I want to be able to talk about the things that are happening locally and be that like go-to person for the people in my community to be like, oh, hey, what is Allie saying today? What happened yesterday? And I just wanted to be that voice that was able to just kind of convey like, hey guys, this is what we're dealing with today, whether it be positive or negative. And so I don't know why. I just, even still today, I have that strong interest, and I kind of do it right now on my Instagram and
Yep.
social medias as I'm
Yep.
posting things that are happening. Because I want people to be informed. I think that's the biggest thing, is because I was so disconnected from reality and everything going on. I was like, people need to be informed. Who's going to inform them? Why not me?
Yeah. I think when you talk about kind of all of those impulses from your younger years and then you compare it to what you're doing now, you're like you just said, you're doing the thing that you set out to do. It just took a sort of a non-linear path to get there, right?
I just don't get
Uh,
paid for it.
yeah, yeah, well, and that's always fun. Um, Talk to us a little bit about, the experiences you've had that shifted the direction, shifted the trajectory of your life. To the extent you're comfortable talking about any of it. I don't want to overstep, but I do want people to hear about kind of what made you transition from not being really interested in what's going on in the world to being like, oh, people need to be informed. I need to understand what's going on. And then to the point where you were running for office and now you're very involved in politics.
So I will say I am an open book. That is something that I have prided myself on, of being authentic. What you see online is what you see on in person. I don't change. So please don't ever feel like you're overstepping with questions. I love to talk about as much as I possibly can. So I would say the small shift happened in 2016 when Donald Trump first won the presidency. I personally went out and I voted for Hillary Clinton. I really wanted to see a woman president. And I didn't really expect or know what was going to happen with the Trump presidency, but I was hoping it wasn't going to be as bad as everybody was setting out. And I was like, oh, everybody's just mad because he's a celebrity. Granted, I don't think we need a celebrity as president, but whatever. You never want the person in charge of your country to fail. So I was like, as much as I don't like him, I really hope he does well.
Yeah.
And as I started to pay attention in 2016, not a whole lot, but then I started hearing the talks of overturning of Roe v. Wade. And that's when I started to really pay attention. I joined TikTok in 2020 during the COVID shutdown. I feel like when everybody joined TikTok. And I didn't join for political reasons. I joined because I had literally nothing else to do. I was stuck in the house. And I was just doing like TikTok trend dances. I was doing these like lip sync videos with my daughter. Nothing special whatsoever. And then I started shifting into more controversial content, talking about the COVID vaccine, talking about mask wearing, because at the time I was working at a doctor office and we wouldn't let you in unless you wore a mask, and how many people I had to argue with about it. And so that content started gaining traction. And then it shifted into the hard, like, deep dive, deep dig of being very, very vocal about women's reproductive care. And it wasn't coming from a place of like knowledge or experience. It was just my feelings. And I was just like, if you don't want an abortion, don't get one. And like that was the kind of videos that I would make. And when Roe v. Wade was overturned, I was very loud. I made a very angry video, and I think it's still on my page on TikTok, where I'm like screaming at the camera, because I did do more research on what was going on with the Dobbs decision. And I was like, this isn't stopping at abortion. This is also going to go after IVF and contraceptives and everything else that has to do with women's reproductive care. If you think this is just about abortion, you're sadly mistaken. And I was like, women are going to die. Women are going to be denied care. Like, this is serious. And within weeks, we started having our first reports of women in like Texas and Florida, being denied access to an abortion because there's still a fetal heartbeat, even though she's miscarrying. And, she's been told to wait outside and bleed until she's crashing and then they can help her. And so I was sharing these stories. I was sharing the articles as they came out, trying to get people to understand, like, this is serious. This isn't like an isolated event. This is going to continue to happen. And eventually somebody's going to die. Thankfully, these women were able to get the care at the last minute, but somebody's last minute may be the end. And so I'm sharing these stories almost at like weekly at that point, and being a voice and trying to bring awareness to what was going on, not realizing that I was soon to be one of those same articles that was going to come out. Roe v. Wade was overturned in the summer. Tennessee put in its trigger ban in August of 22. I found out I was pregnant the first week of November. So just a few short months later. Planned for and wanted pregnancy. We just bought this house that we're in right now. Just got married earlier that year. Like, everything was going according to plan. And I was scared to find out I was pregnant, knowing what was going on. But also I was just like, my first pregnancy was fine. There's nothing for me to be worried about. Well, I was sadly mistaken, because at 20 weeks pregnant, I went in for my anatomy scan. This was mid-February. So about six-ish months after Tennessee's trigger ban. Went in for my anatomy scan, found out there were some fetal anomalies. My doctor referred me to a high-risk specialist. 4 days later, February 24th, we went in and were pretty much told that like everything that could be wrong was wrong. All of her organs didn't form correctly. She had no amniotic fluid. Her development was a month behind. There was no lung development. She had a rare brain defect, and pretty much the doctor just said, like, she's not compatible. Either she's going to pass in the womb or shortly after she's born. You need to make a decision. You can either stay pregnant, but know that there are these risks. And the longer you stay pregnant, the worse she's going to get and the higher risk your health becomes. Or you can terminate, you can terminate your pregnancy, but you can't do that here. You're going to have to look out of state, and I can't help you with any of those resources. Because at the time, Tennessee law, the only exception was to preserve the life of the mother, irreversible repairment of bodily function, whatever the wording they used. And doctors were unsure what they were allowed to say, if they were even allowed to say the word abortion, what they were allowed to recommend, if anything at all. And that was it. But also, nobody could tell these doctors how to define when life of the mother was at risk enough to qualify. Is me being told my life is at risk if I stay pregnant, is that good enough? Or do I need to be dying and crashing and at the ER bleeding out before it's good enough? Who gets to decide that? Our politicians or our doctors? And our politicians, they couldn't define it because none of them, well, not none of, some of them are doctors, but the majority are not. And so I had to make the difficult decision. I have a daughter already here. She's 7 now, but she was 5 at the time. And I couldn't risk losing my life and leaving her without her mom. So I had to make that decision to terminate my pregnancy. And then I had to navigate what that looked like, trying to find care out of state. We're not wealthy individuals. Again, we just bought this house. We had no money. My husband just switched jobs. I was in the middle of switching jobs. And it was a really difficult process. And it's something that we would need a lot more than an hour show to go into. But it's a lot more than people realize. It's not as easy as just showing up to another clinic. There's a lot of financial aspects that go into it, travel aspects, childcare aspects. And so I documented what I was going through. My TikTok family already knew I was pregnant. That was something I shared with them. And they knew that I was going to a high risk specialist because it was something I already shared with them, that the pregnancy, something wasn't okay, positive thoughts. And so I updated them. That update video is the video that went viral. That updated video, I think, sits at like 3.3 million views right now. That video is what catapulted me into the public eye. And I continued to essentially like vlog what was going on. And I chose to do that for one main reason. People needed to see what these abortion bans were actually doing to women. It's one thing to read an article and see a name and see, oh man, that sucks. She went through that. And then you scroll through your feed and continue on. It's another thing to watch somebody struggle and in pain and going through it in real time. And that's why I chose to share it, because a lot of people are like, why would you film that? Like, that's such a vulnerable time. I'm like, because people needed to see it. And I still have people that question me. They're like, you didn't actually have to go to New York. You didn't actually have to get an abortion. And I'm like, you're right. Totally right. I just went through all that trauma for fun. But I shared it, one, to let people know, but two, for the documentation that it did happen. And it was a real process that I had to go through. And so I didn't share it with the intent of it going viral. I didn't share it with the intent of it making the news. I didn't share with the intent of reaching millions of people. I shared it because I wanted, hopefully, someone to see it, to understand how harmful these bans are in these abortion states, abortion ban states. And so that is what shifted my stance with politics. That is what kind of catapulted me into what was going on, because when I got back home from New York, I sat there and I told myself, I have a daughter in this state, and I'd be damned if I just sat here and didn't do anything to protect her from going through the exact same thing I went through. And so I started to think, like, what can I do? I'm just one person. What can one person do? And so I was reached out to by the Center for Reproductive Rights a couple weeks after my abortion. They asked me if I'd be interested in joining a lawsuit against Tennessee, because they currently had one going on in Texas versus Zarowski. And that was the quickest yes I've ever said. Absolutely yes. That's how I'm going to get involved. That's how I'm going to change things, is we're going to sue the state and hopefully win. Little did I know, lawsuits take a really long time. We are currently still in this lawsuit. Our next hearing is April of 2026. So we're just kind of chilling for another year, with nothing happening. And women are still being denied care here. And so, quickly realizing that the lawsuit wasn't going to be a quick fix, I was like, okay, well, I have to do something else. I can't just sit here and wait for years for something to happen. And then I was reached out to by my local county party, the county party that I am now the chair of. And I joined them, and I was surrounded by a group of people that understood the pain that I went through and were there to help me through it. And after a few months and being involved and starting to be more active in the community and joining things like Planned Parenthood and these other like small activism groups that were fighting for women's reproductive care, there started to become a bug in my ear about running for office. And I was like, you're funny. My mom was actually the first one. She was like, have you ever thought about running for office? I'm like, what? No. Ew. Why would I do that? Um, I met with my representative, who was my opponent, in June that year. And I sat with him for 2 hours and I told him my story. And I told him that I wanted legislation proposed that I was calling Miley's Law. I was naming it after the daughter I lost. And Miley's Law essentially would just give exceptions for parents to decide to terminate their own pregnancies if diagnosed with fatal fetal anomalies. I threw in fatal in there because you can't argue with a fatal diagnosis. You can't. And so, as much as I would just want the abortion ban lifted altogether, I knew with a very heavily ran Republican state, you had to take little tiny steps with them. And when I sat with him and I talked to him, I quickly realized how disconnected these people are. I was telling him how I lost my pregnancy, and he cut me off. He was like, wait a second. And this is something I actually published during my campaign. There's live audio of it. Him questioning me, saying, you lost your first pregnancy. Or no, you had your first pregnancy and then you lost this one. And I was like, yeah. And he said, well, maybe I'm just a guy, but I always heard that it was the first pregnancies that went bad. And I was like, I mean, they can, but any pregnancy can go bad, like it's milk. No, but any pregnancy can fail. No pregnancy is guaranteed. And that was just like a what? Like my jaw was just stuck open. I was like, did you really just say that? And then I try to like humanize my story with him, because he has a daughter who's not much younger than me. And I was like, if she went through this and she called you and she said, Dad, baby's not going to make it. There's no brain, or there's a brain, but it's defective. The heart's half working. There's no lungs. All the organs aren't working. Like, baby's going to die. I have to make a decision. What advice would you give your daughter? And he told me that because of how he grew up, that he would say that he thinks she should continue the pregnancy. And I said, even if it's putting her life at risk. And he said, that's just how I grew up. And I said, if you were my father, I would hate you. Telling your daughter to put her own life at risk for a non-viable fetus is beyond words. And after that conversation is when I knew that man did not need to be representing me or my daughter or the people in my community. And so more people started coming at me like, hey, have you thought about running for office? And I'm like, I don't even know if I qualify. Like, I don't have a degree in political science. I've never interned at the Capitol. And they're like, you think half the people down there are qualified to be there? And I'm like, you know what? You're right. You're right. Because half of them, they just run unopposed and they get elected because there's no opposition. And so the qualifications, it turns out I am qualified. I was over the age of 21. I'm a US citizen. And I've lived in the place that I live at that time for at least a year. So I qualified. That's all you need. And so I made the decision in, I would say, October is when I finally decided that I was going to run against him. And then I announced shortly after that, I think it was or no, I decided in September and I announced in October. And then I ran a 13-month campaign. Um, and as you said in the bio, it was one of the strongest campaigns, one of the strongest races in the state. I had the closest margin of any Democrat trying to flip a seat in Tennessee for state house with just over 45% of the vote. As a first time candidate with no name recognition, no background whatsoever in politics, we almost won. Um, but Tennessee shifted a little more to the right last year than we anticipated because of Trump being at the top of the ticket. And I think that's what cost us the election. But for 13 months, I shared my story as much as I could. I testified in front of the United States Senate. I was actually invited to the White House during Women's History Month. I traveled to New York multiple times, Texas, Louisiana, California. I traveled and shared my story to anybody that was giving me a microphone to share. I did live news with like CNN, ABC, MSNBC. I did article interviews. I did interviews with people in different countries. So like my story wasn't just national, it was international. I had people reaching out to me from Germany and they were like, "Hey, I just saw you on the Spiegel, I think is what it's called."
Yeah.
And they were like, "We're so sorry for what you went through. We're rooting for you." I had people in different countries hoping I was going to win my election because of the passion that I had for reproductive care. Not because they thought I was going to be a great legislator and I knew all the ins and outs. It was because I was a real person that was trying to make change. And that's what we need in our government is real people. I am a lower income, hard working class mom. Um, I don't have any special interest. Nobody's putting money in my pocket. Um, I did it because I wanted to see change. I didn't want to see anyone else go through what I went through. And me sharing my story opened up this space for so many women to feel seen and heard. I can't tell you how many messages I received of other people sharing their stories with me and saying, "Thank you for being so public with yours. I don't feel as alone anymore." And that I think was the biggest impact I made. I may have not won the election, but I definitely won in a different aspect. I made people feel heard. I made people feel safe. And I brought a voice to the abortion topic, a word that everybody's supposed to feel ashamed about. They make you feel like you're a nasty person because you said abortion. And that's not how it should be. It's a medical procedure,
Yeah.
it's medical care. And that's where I am now is post election. I'm still telling my story and I will every chance I can, even though it's been 2 years and it's still relevant today as it was 2 years ago.
Yeah,
And
maybe even more relevant as
exactly.
we go through everything we're going through. Let's take a quick break and when we come back, Tova, you can dive. I can see you have questions formulating. So we'll take a quick break and we'll be right back, everyone. Well, hello there, ladies. Are you ready to elevate your life and connect with like-minded souls? Join us every week at the Go Boldly Together weekly Women's Circle, where strength meets sisterhood. Dive into empowering discussions, share your victories, and navigate challenges together. Our circle is a safe space for growth and inspiration. Experience the power of collective wisdom and unleash your full potential. Don't miss out on the transformative energy. Click the link in our show notes or visit us at goboldlyinitiative.com/women's weekly group to learn more about our Go Boldly Circle today. Together, let's embrace the journey of personal development and let's celebrate that unstoppable force within each of us. Okay, so welcome back to the show. Before the break, Allie, you kind of walked us through the progression of how you got to where you are right now. And it's an incredible journey that you are on, that you're continuing to be on. And I want to say before I turn it over to Tova for more questions, I want to say thank you for being so willing to be vulnerable and put yourself out there. We talk about these things on the show all the time, not specifically with respect to, politics, but I don't even think abortion is political. It's women's healthcare. But beyond that, being willing to share things that are scary and frightening and overwhelming and sad and all the hard feelings is, as you were saying before the break, it's something that can change lives. It's something that can, even if it changes one life, though I think it changes many more, it can impact people in such a profound way. So I think it's amazing that you're sharing like this. And I will
Thank you.
stop. I will turn it over to Tova.
Well, I did want to just, I think you answered your own question. At one point you said, what can one person do? Like
Mm.
and I think you've shown like, and I get the feeling that you've just started, but I think you've shown like what one person can do when they're willing to be vulnerable and put yourself out there and just talk to people. And you have had the ability to talk to so many people, but as I think you saw, even when you came home from New York and you met with like the local Democratic Party, and it probably was just like a small group in like somebody's living room or something, and or a church. I mean, I know ours meets a lot in a church like hall, which might be a New Jersey blue state thing that we meet in a church, but it's not usually a big group of people, and the fact that you were able to find like comfort in community, I think is important for all of us to remember that like what we do on our phones is it's important because you can touch so many lives, but it's also really important to like meet in in I've been calling it tactile life, like in the world. But I guess so if I had to have a question, as opposed to just complimenting all that you've done, I imagine that even with this drive that you wanted to talk to as many people and you wanted to advocate and have your story and Miley's story be told, just to have that out there. Um, there were times that you would get stuck or frustrated or upset. Or I can only imagine the feelings you felt when you left your representative's office and you come to terms when somebody does not understand basic female reproduction and basic women's health and they're in charge of things. Like time and time again, Riley and I will be on the phone and I'll be like, how are they in charge? Like, how? How are they still in charge of stuff? So when you got stuck or frustrated, uh, what did you turn to, whether it was something inside you or people? Like, what would you turn to kind of keep going?
Yeah, I will say the last year was there was a lot of frustration. There was a lot of very damning times where I wasn't sure if I could continue forward. I want to say this because I didn't mention it before the break. When I made it to New York, and this is something I feel is important to say, when I was sharing my story at the time, a lot of people were saying, don't do it, don't get the abortion, doctors are wrong all the time, let your baby live, give her a chance at life. And I went to New York and within a couple hours of being at the clinic, found out that my daughter's heart was already stopped. She had already passed away at some point in that 10 days from my high risk appointment. And the surgeon there told me that I was at the end of the 2 week window where when a fetus passes and your body doesn't recognize it, you're at a higher risk of infection, blood clots, or going septic. And so I ended up undergoing an emergency abortion within an hour of finding out that my daughter was gone, completely alone. My husband wasn't allowed to be in there with me. I was in a foreign city with doctors I'd never met, completely and utterly alone. And that experience was traumatizing enough to make me want to fight. So, what I want to say with that is yes, doctors can be wrong. They're human beings, but we are at a point in our timeline of life that we have so much technology and medicine and knowledge that it's very rare that doctors get that wrong. But again, always get multiple opinions, which I had. I had two opinions. But trust your doctors. That is one thing I cannot stress enough that I tried to stress during my campaign is trust doctors. If you're not going to trust women to make decisions for their own bodies, trust their doctors because they know what they're doing. But to answer your question, as I mentioned, I am a working class person and running for office is not a cheap thing. They make it that way so normal people can't run. And so I solely relied on everybody else donating to my campaign. But with that, I was also having to take time away from my job because I was traveling so much to go share my story, to do these fundraisers, to, bring more attention to my campaign to hopefully win. And so we got to a point that like we were struggling financially. We couldn't pay our mortgage. I couldn't put food in my fridge. My mom had to send like Instacart orders to my house multiple times just so I could feed my family. And that was something that was a reality for me. And my mental health declined, having to share a traumatic story over and over and over and over again. Though it's therapeutic sometimes, there are also times where it becomes too much to bear, having to relive what I went through. I don't think there was a single interview last year that I talked about what happened where I didn't cry. I think I've become numb to it now, just so I can kind of get through my story. But it's hard. It's hard on your mental health. And there were times that I called my campaign manager crying, telling her that I can't do it anymore, that I was going to drop out of the race, that I mentally cannot do it anymore. My marriage is struggling. We can't pay our bills. Like my world is falling apart. And everybody else is just like, no, keep going, keep going. But like, nobody can help you. As a candidate, people can't send you personal donations, right? That's campaign finance fraud. And I know that people in Congress can get away with it, but little people like me, if campaign finance jail is real jail.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to go to real jail. And so as much as people were like, oh, like, what's your Venmo? Like, we'll help you out. And I'm like, you can't. You literally can't. And so it was a lot. And my campaign manager, she also went through a lot. Like she has said that she doesn't know if she can run another campaign next year because my campaign mentally messed with her so much, that she doesn't know if she's going to be able to do it again. And I don't blame her. And it wasn't anything I did. It was just
Right.
the weight of what my campaign stood for and how much backlash and ridicule we got from the opposition. They sent out mailers close to election time, two mailers, that had my 7-year-old daughter on them, and sent them out to the entire community talking about my parenting. Because we went to Clarksville's Pride event where I was a vendor at, and there was a kid-friendly, family-friendly drag show. I know there are some drag shows that are not kid-friendly. I've been to them. But family-friendly drag show, meaning like one of them was dressed as Taylor Swift and singing Taylor Swift. And me and Adelie, my daughter, were Swifties. All she saw was somebody dressed up like Taylor Swift, dancing around and singing. And Adelie was having the time of her life. And they took screenshots of my video from TikTok and plastered it on a mailer and sent it out to the entire community, saying that I was indoctrinating my kid to be around pedophiles and all this other stuff, and used images of my daughter, none of me, mind you. There was not a single photo of me on that flyer, and sent it out. And there was an event after that happened at her school with a teacher who doesn't whatever like me, what I stand for, and took it out on my daughter at school. My daughter's autistic. She has ADHD, sensory processing disorder. She has severe anxiety, so some days are harder than others. And she was having a bad day one day, and the teacher took out her frustration on me, on my daughter, saying, your behavior is exactly why your mom's not going to win her election at school. And for me, going after somebody's kid not only should be off limits, but that is just the most inhumane, disgusting, like lowest level I could imagine. They didn't attack my policies. They didn't attack the things I was running on. They didn't attack like how I would be as a representative. They just attacked the fact that I brought my daughter with me to Clarksville Pride and she had fun. They attacked my parenting. So they made it personal. And so then again, at that point, I was like, I can't do this anymore. I can't subject my daughter to this. She didn't ask for this. She's 7. But what kept me going and what keeps me going today is reminding myself that this is so much bigger than me. I took so much flack. I took so much of the weight of everything last year because I was the face of my campaign, because I was the one speaking out loud and proud about women's reproductive care, because I wasn't pushed back into this little corner that they wanted me to be in. I was very vocal. So I took the brunt of all of it because I wanted what was best for everybody else. And it wasn't, my platform wasn't just abortion. My opposition, they kept saying I was a one issue candidate. Well, it's hard to be a one issue candidate when Tennessee's not a one issue state. We have a gun problem here. We have our veterans. I live right next to Fort Campbell military base. We have affordability problem here. The cost of living versus wages is astronomical. And so there was a lot of issues that I was running on, but they focused and honed in on the fact of my story was the main one, which was fine because that was mostly what was heard. But at the end of it all, it wasn't just about me. It was about my neighbors who are on disability and who were worried about Trump or the Republicans here taking away their access to disability. It was about the single mom who also is working 3 jobs, who can barely make it by because none of these jobs are paying her enough and she can't afford childcare. It was about, the veteran who served our country, who can barely find a hot meal to eat. That shouldn't be how we treat the people that dedicated their lives, put their lives on the line to giving us what we have today. It was about everybody else. And that's what kept me going. Yes, I was depressed. Yes, I wanted to quit. Yes, it was the worst year of my life. And I don't think I've ever said that publicly. It was the worst year of my life post losing Miley.
I don't think people realize how hard campaigning is, just regular campaigning, not when you also have all the emotional stress that you're describing. I don't think people realize the grind that is running for office at any level, whether it's a school board, a state level, federal, whatever. It is an endless grind of talking to people and trying to make your points and being attacked. And I mean, as a culture, we should obviously, I mean, I think it's obvious, but it's not because people don't do it, but it should be a disqualifying act to like attack somebody's kids. Like that's insane. But it's not, right? There's the one thing I realized, I guess, when I got into politics is when you meet people who are members of Congress, who are senators, who are state officials, etc., they're people. They're not geniuses. They're not, I mean, by and large, you're not talking to like the smartest person you've ever met in your life. You're generally talking to like a person that could be your neighbor, bar the fact that they have millions and millions of dollars and I don't. And so I think, getting it out there on top of all the other stuff we were talking about, getting it out there that running for office is like the qualifications are not super high, as you were saying, right? Like there's not a lot you have to run for office, but the people who make the most positive impact are people who care about certain things like bread prices, like milk prices, like the military, like abortion rights, like women, just full stop women. And so if you're out there listening to this, and we always like to make sure we highlight these things for our listeners, because our goal as a podcast and as life coaches, as people, is to get people out from behind their computers and out in the world and doing stuff, right? And whether it's running for office or working on a campaign or writing postcards or doing your 5 calls, whatever it is, one person can make a difference as you're demonstrating. And it doesn't have to be that you're on TikTok talking about the hardest thing you've ever been through in your life. Though, if you can, that's something that, I think we could all aspire to. But if it's something smaller, if it's something less vulnerable, that's okay. It's just getting out there and being involved. I think one of there's so many hard things about post-Trump America, but like one of the things that's hardest is knowing you have neighbors who clearly don't care about other humans, right? Like that just have values that are so directly opposite to yours that you're like, how do I function in a world where I know that you don't care that there's children in cages, where I know that you don't care that women's health is gone, right? Um, that you'd rather have a tax rebate for Elon Musk than, I don't know, national parks. And so I think all of that combined really messes with your mental health. And as you're talking, you're saying, I was depressed. It was the worst year of my life. It was so hard. And yet I kept doing it because I wanted to be there for all these other people. I want to like circle back to that and talk a little bit about, if you're comfortable sharing, talk a little bit about how are you taking care of yourself right now? What are you doing for you that is allowing you to continue the fight in whatever format that takes in your next steps? But what are you doing for you that is protecting yourself and your family so that, you can continue on this path that you're on?
I will say, to credit of your comment about, your neighbor clearly doesn't care about other people. Something I said in a video recently was, I vote Democrat because I care about what happens to other people. You vote Republican because you care about what happens to you. And that's the difference between us. My husband calls me a bleeding heart liberal, and I'm like, I proudly wear that on my
Yeah.
sleeve.
I love how people think that's an insult.
Right. And I'm like, oh God, I care. It's radical to care about people. It shouldn't be like that. Um, during the campaign, it took a lot. I would say closer to primary time. So August of last year is when my team was like, you need a therapist, you need a counselor. Otherwise, like, regardless of the campaign, like, you were going south very quickly. And we're worried about you. And so we found a therapist in my district, actually, who did it pro bono. Because I told him, I was like, I don't have a lot of money. And he works on a sliding scale anyway. I was like, I don't have a lot of money and the campaign can't pay for this. So, like, I don't know what you can offer me. We may just kind of be saying hi and bye right now, and that's it. And he was like, you know what? You're putting in a lot of really important work. He was like, I will do this absolutely free as long as you need me. And that was like the biggest weight off my chest of like, oh my God, somebody's actually going to help me. And so I had calls with him to start off. I think I had a call with him every other week. And we talked for an hour every time. And, some of it was about personal life. Some of it was about the campaign. And it was just a way for me to get the weight off my chest because, I have friends, I have family, I have, people around me that I can vent to, but nobody truly understands what it's like to be a candidate to run for office unless you've done it. And if you ask any person that's ever ran for office, they'll tell you it's probably the most isolating thing they've ever done. Even though you're surrounded by this community that's voting for you and rooting for you, and you have your campaign team, and everything looks so great when it's from the outside looking in, you're the face of it. You're the voice of it. Like you said, I'm the one that has to go knock the doors. I'm the one that has to talk to every single one of these people. I can't tell you how many doors got slammed in my face 2 seconds after I knock, and they're like, are you a Republican or a Democrat? I'm like, I'm a Democrat. Slam. Didn't even give me a chance. And those hurt because I'm like, don't look at me as a party. I'm a person.
Right.
And I'm a person that's taking time out of my day to come walk this neighborhood, knock on your door, and see what matters to you. Because if I win this election, I'm your representative. Whether you like it or not, I'm up there to help things be better for you. I don't care if you're a Republican. I don't care if you're a Democrat. I don't care if you're independent. I don't care if you hate all politics. That's fair. They're pretty rough. But at the end of the day, I'm a representative for everybody, not just the Dems. And so for me, it was just really disheartening that, like, just because I have a D next to my name on the ballot that disqualified me from them even talking to me.
Yeah.
And I will say there were a few that did actually sit down and let me talk. And some of them I talked to them for an hour, if not more. And I earned their vote. There was a lot of Trump Allie voters in my district this last year. They split their ballot because I took the time to come knock on their door and talk to them as the human beings that they are and show them that not all Democrats are radical leftists. We're not all like crazy, want to control the world or anything. But I showed them that I'm just a regular person that wanted to make things better. I grew up in a small town. My family was poor. Like, I'm just like you guys. Whereas my opponent, completely wealthy, he's a property developer here. He's in the top 2% of income in our county.
Yeah.
Right? Like, he self-funded his own campaign.
Yeah.
I couldn't put $5 of my own money in the
Yeah.
campaign.
Very different worlds.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
I was gonna say for today, I stopped seeing my therapist after the election because one, I wanted to give him a break. I felt bad for him. I was like, I have put so much on you. But I just wanted to disconnect. And I did. I disconnected for a couple weeks after the election. I was more upset about what happened federally than what happened in my race because I went in knowing there's very small chance that I would win this. So I wasn't too devastated. I was heartbroken because I felt like I failed all the people that voted for me. I feel like I let them down, and that's something I have to deal with internally. But right now I'm staying as active as I can. I go to rallies and protests and marches when I can. I show up to town halls and these events when I can. But I'm also limiting myself, one, because I'm pregnant and just walking to the bathroom is exhausting.
Yes.
But two, I have to prioritize my mental health too. And if I start doing too much again, I'm going to start spiraling again. But I say that because I also want to say this because I encourage people to step up and run for office. And you're like, why would we do that after you just said it was the worst year of your life? Well, I'll tell you why. Because what I went through is not what you're going to go through. And this is just me speaking boldly or broadly. I jumped in right after I lost a very wanted pregnancy. I jumped in right after a very traumatic event. I had all eyes on me across the country and the globe. That's not normal for a state house race. That's not normal for a government like Congress race. Like, yeah, you may get more eyes on you, but you're not getting a global audience. What I went through was very, very unique and different. You will not go through that unless you have the same kind of story I do. And so I encourage people to run for office because we need normal people. We need the average person who just cares enough to even consider running for office, and not because they want power, because they want to help. And so I get asked, and I've been asked since the night I lost, if I'm going to run again. People ask me all the time, even still to this day, they're in my comments like, I hope you run again. Even people in my district, they're like, I really hope you run again. I really want to vote for you again. And my answer right now is, I don't know what I'm doing yet. I got to have this baby. I got to survive child labor and birth. I got to survive the newborn stage, and then see where I'm at mentally. Because now it's not just me, my husband, and daughter. We have a baby in the mix now. And clearly, kids are not off limits to the Republican Party here. And so, do I subject my family to that again? Do I subject myself going through all that again? Now, I'm not post trauma anymore. I'm a couple years out, right? I'm not brand new to the political scene. I have that year, that 13 months plus under my belt now. So I'm a little more, I have a little more strategy than just learning everything on the go. I feel I'm more equipped now. But the real question is, can I subject myself and my family to that again? I don't know. Am I the right candidate to run again? I don't know. Maybe my purpose was to lay out the path for the next person to step in and hopefully flip this seat and get that guy out of there. I don't know. Maybe my purpose is at a lower government level, like county commission or city councils, school board. I don't know. Or maybe my purpose isn't even being a rep. Maybe my purpose is organizing. Maybe my purpose is like going out and recruiting people that care and give a crap to be involved. Maybe that's my purpose. I don't know what my purpose is right now, but I do know that I'm not going to stop what I'm doing. I may take breaks just for my own mental sanity. There's times where I don't post on Instagram for a day or two, and people start messaging me and they're like, "Hey, you good?" Like, yeah, I'm just taking a break. It's okay. There's still plenty of news, I promise.
Yeah.
Um, but and that's something I had to learn throughout the campaign. Something I had to learn also was to stop reading comments. Before I ran for office, I was a TikToker. I read all the comments, try to respond to people as much as I could to engage with my audience. That was a really hard shift going from influencer to candidate politician, because they're like, you need to stop reading these comments. My campaign manager kicked me off the Twitter account for the campaign. She was like, you're not getting on Twitter. The comments are awful. You don't need to read that. She was like, it hurts my mental health. And they're not even about me. These comments aren't even about me,
Yeah.
and it hurts me to read. She was like, you don't need to read that. And so my social media access was getting limited because of the amount of comments that were coming through. And that's something that I've carried with me after the election, is I don't read all the comments anymore.
Yeah.
Which I think is a big thing for mental health.
I think, we talk about this on the show again all the time. Setting boundaries for yourself in any context is essential to being happy and content and comfortable and like mentally healthy. But when you're running for office, having good boundaries, healthy boundaries within the context of running for office, I think is the only way you can get through it and function. I mean,
Yeah.
otherwise, like you're saying, you're bombarded all the time with comments, with people wanting something from you, with people, I've had people who run for office and they're like, no, on Thursday nights for an hour, that's my time at the soccer field with my kid and I'm not picking up my phone. I'm not, so you have to be willing to and capable of saying no when you have to, and knowing when it's okay to say no. All those things, are hard to learn, and they're hard to learn in your sort of regular everyday life. But then you add in the mix of like, people are giving me money. Well, not me, but people are giving the campaign money. And you're like,
Right.
I feel like I owe something and I have to therefore show up every time somebody asks me for something. And you have to find a way to balance that.
Yeah, you feel obligated. And that's
Absolutely.
something else I've mentioned to my campaign manager, was about rerunning. I was like, I kind of feel like I'm obligated to, because everybody wants me to. But at the same time, I have to think about what's best for me and my family.
Yeah.
During the campaign, I found out I was pregnant in August, shortly after the primary. We didn't tell anybody because we didn't want people to look at me differently. We didn't want people to treat
Right.
me differently, to be like, oh, well, how is she going to be a representative and have a baby? Like,
Yeah.
God forbid, women. And so we hid my pregnancy, but there were times where I was supposed to be out door knocking. And mind you, I don't know if you've been to Tennessee in the middle of the summer, but it's hot.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It is hot. And I'm also an asthmatic. So like the heat and the thickness of it is already rough anyway. But I was at the beginning of my pregnancy, first trimester, nauseous as crap, like exhausted. And so there were times where I didn't go out and door knock on the weekends or during the week.
Yeah.
And the state party was getting frustrated with me. They're like, why isn't Allie out knocking? Why isn't Allie doing this? And my campaign manager's like, oh, she's not feeling well. She just got a little ick, whatever. We had to just make up something because we didn't want to be like, oh, she's pregnant. And then
Yeah.
because you can't tell one person in politics something
No,
and expect them to stay
there
right
are
there.
no
It will
secrets.
wildfire. Yeah, wildfire. It would spread. But like, that's something we had to do. We had to lie, for my own health, because I
Mhm.
was like, Megan, I physically cannot today. I can't. And she was like, okay, so you're not going to, and we'll deal with it when they call. But the fact that we even had to do that is just annoying anyway. But I mean, I get it. Like, this is the most flippable seat in the state. So they're like, what are you doing? Why aren't you out talking to people? And I'm like, because I'm pregnant. And then they all felt bad on election night when I announced my pregnancy. They're like, is that why she wasn't doing so much? And Megan was like, yes. And they're like, oh God, well, now I feel like a jerk. She's like, well,
Yeah.
you should.
Well,
Just
I do
trust
have to,
us. Yeah,
yeah, I
trust
have
us
to
when we
hand it to
say.
your campaign manager, because it sounds like, and your whole campaign, like, telling you to get a therapist and protecting your social media and protecting you, like you uh, ended up with the right team around you for sure to,
Oh my gosh. My campaign manager, so her full name is Megan Lang, and she actually was just elected chair of her county party
awesome.
Saturday. Um, she truly, more than just a campaign manager, she's like a sister to me. And she said at every team meeting, she was like, Mom, Allie first, candidate second,
Yeah.
period. She was like, if Adelie has a fall festival and Allie's supposed to be calling donors asking for money, she's going to the fall festival and we're gonna either hire or get some volunteers to call donors. She was like, mom first, candidate second.
Mm.
And that I think is kind of what saved me from a very severe mental decline is because of her.
Well, and I know we need to wrap up, even though we could talk to you for like hours, but we want to let
I
you
can
have your
talk
time.
forever.
Um, I want to highlight a lot of what you've said because I know, and Riley has run for office and locally, and I have not because you have to be very brave, and both of you have been, and I really enjoy supporting people in our town who run for office. But I think a lot of the lessons that both of you have learned. And you especially, Allie, in the most recent round and what you've talked about can help a lot of people who are listening going like feeling so overwhelmed about what's happening in just the world right now and thinking like get a therapist, step one. Like find a therapist. If it needs to be like an online therapist, if it needs to be like every other week, like figure out
Yeah.
what your insurance will allow, like get a therapist. It is huge. It is wonderful when we can talk to our family and friends, but you need to be able to have an outside person. But also, it is okay to step away from the internet for
Yes.
a day or two. Like, we're not, when you talk about stepping away, you're not talking about sticking your head in the sand. You're not talking about ignoring things. I know I talk about a lot on the podcast and in our women's circle, like, I use 5 calls because to use the app to like call our representatives. Not that I don't have their phone number saved in my phone, but there's so much going on, I get overwhelmed. And it helps me focus. But at the same time, sometimes there's just a day like I can't call. Like I'm so frustrated, and I'm like, I'll just call the next day. Like
Mhm.
you have to, we have to. This is a marathon, and I like to remind myself when I'm feeling dejected and exhausted and hopeless that that's great because it means I still care.
Yeah.
And if I ever stop feeling that way, it means that I've given up. And
Right.
so I'm going to embrace all those feelings. But I think you've given kind of a blueprint for like checking in on ourselves mentally, like all the time. Like okay, does this make sense for me right now? Nope. Okay, I need to take a step back. Am I, you know, does a rally make sense for me this weekend? Yes, I need to engage with more community. It's going to feel good to be there. Or no, I need a mom this weekend. And no matter what we're doing, momming has to be my priority. And maybe it's momming at a rally. Like I don't know, but I think that you've given, even though you were talking about it from a candidate's perspective, it's a template that a lot of people who I don't know that people maybe people are newer to activism, or maybe new to activism at this level. Maybe you're
Yeah.
new to the point of like, well, I cared in 2016, but now it's a different ball game. I just want to thank you for kind of like and highlight everything you said because it's helpful for all of us.
Yeah. I want to
Yeah.
circle back real quick to when you were talking about, and then we do have to wrap up because we're long today. But I want to circle back to you talking about the abortion ban states and the way these laws are worded. And I want to make sure we highlight for people to think about the idea that, the mom's life is at risk. We're not even including in that conversation the mental health of the mother, right?
Right.
And so, which also puts lives at risk, right?
Mhm.
Because if you are forced to carry to term a child or a fetus that's never going to survive, right? That's never even going to take a breath. And you have to spend, I mean, the 10 months of pregnancy is already mind blowing, right? Your whole life changes, your whole mental health changes, everything changes, and you have an alien growing inside of you, and you're like,
Yeah.
what is happening? Um, if you add to that the grief and the trauma of the loss, and you're not talking about that as part of a woman's like survival, then you clearly have no idea what you're talking about. Because even when you have a healthy, low risk pregnancy and you don't have anxiety or depression, you're still worried. You're still
Yeah.
worried the whole time. And then they're born and you're still worried, right? Like,
Yeah.
because the second you decide to have a child, you start worrying and it never stops.
Yeah.
And I just want to highlight that because it really pisses me off that like they don't get it. Like they don't get it.
Well,
We're all mad, I know, but like I just feel like I needed to say the words out loud and just because it is traumatizing and it
it
is
is.
re-traumatizing to have to constantly talk about it and to constantly try to explain to people and convince people that your life and your mental health is worth anything.
Yeah.
That is so traumatizing for all of us.
Something I've been trying to say a lot lately that I hope starts sticking in people's heads, especially the pro-life side, is a positive pregnancy test does not guarantee a healthy newborn baby ever. Like you said, you can be the healthiest low risk pregnancy and things can still go wrong.
Yeah.
There was just a report the other day that I shared that the number one unaliver of women, I say unaliver because social media killer. I don't have to filter my words. The number one killer of pregnant women is homicide.
Yeah.
Domestic abuse, domestic violence. And then we don't even touch postpartum depression and how much of a killer that is. But I'm 35, I'll be 36 weeks this week, and I was crying in the bathtub yesterday because of how much pain my body's in, how mentally exhausted I am. And I wanted this pregnancy. I wanted this. But it's a lot. It is so much. This is a being that is taking all your nutrients, your energy, your blood source, like everything out of you to grow this life. And it is magical and it is a miracle, but it's not easy. It's not easy for anyone. And to expect anybody to go through it, especially little girls,
Yeah.
is just so far beyond me. And this is so much more than just protecting babies and saving lives. Like, we are also living beings and our lives should be protected and cared for as well. So
Right.
that's a whole nother, we could have a whole nother episode.
We could go on for
I
another
know.
hour.
As you guys are talking, I'm like, and all the women who choose to have an abortion because they need to get out of a marriage with
Yeah.
where there's domestic violence,
Yeah.
and the only way they can afford to get out of it is if they do not have another being that they have to care for.
Yeah.
And how many women are lost every year because they are stuck in a marriage because they can't get an abortion to leave.
And
Like,
they were trapped.
yeah,
They
yeah,
were trapped, forced to have
um,
a pregnancy that they didn't want.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, this is a never-ending conversation.
Yeah.
Um,
Unfortunately.
but we're raising a new generation and we can raise them better.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's
And
hope so.
I,
Right.
yeah, I listen, I will end, we can end on a high. I know we have to end with our fast questions, but I will end with the fact that my 9-year-old son, whenever he's noticed that I've changed the brand, he noticed that we have a different brand of like everything because we don't shop at Target anymore. And he goes, oh, does this company do the DEI? And I said, yes. And he goes, okay. My 13-year-old goes, well, I guess you're raising him well. And I said, yeah, I mean, he does too. But like, I was like, yep, you got to do what you can.
Yeah.
My daughter went and asked her teacher, after all those mailers went out, she went up and asked her teacher if she was a Republican. Like, just straight up said, "Are you a Republican?" And her teacher was like, "I don't really like, talk about politics in school." And she was like, "Well, I asked because the Republicans are really mean." And she told her teacher what happened, but her teacher already knew because her teacher got the mailer. And she was like, "I will say, what they did wasn't okay." She was like, "And I'm sorry that that happened." But my daughter, she also has the knowledge to be like, these people, and I tell her, I'm like, not all Republicans are bad. There's a handful that are just really terrible people. Same with Democrats. Not all Democrats are good
Yeah.
people.
Right.
Um,
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so, but like she knows, she'll tell you my body, my choice. She don't care. She's constantly like, Trump, why are you so dumb? Like I'll be watching the news and she's like, why is he still president? I'm like, that's a really good question.
We're all wondering.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
she's 7 and
Yeah.
she's more engaged in the political sphere than half the people in this country are. Like she's
Yep.
paying attention. She realizes what's happening. And they got rid of government in our schools down here. I don't know if they still teach it in your guys' schools, but they don't teach government down here anymore. That's for a reason. They really like the unintelligent people because they're easier to manipulate.
Yeah, it's much easier to control uneducated
Yeah.
humans than educated ones. We do need to wrap up, and this is a hard transition to make because we're going to ask you like very lighthearted questions, and we've been having a very serious conversation.
That's
So
okay.
I'm going to make it awkward and talk about it in this way because that's how I roll. We like to end our shows with quick response questions. I'm going to ask you 5 questions. You just answer whatever comes first in your mind, and I don't get to ask any follow-up questions. These are meant to be more lighthearted so people can get to know the like fun side of you as well. Not the whatever. It's all fun. So I'm gonna get started. Okay. Question number 1. What is your favorite way to unwind after a long day?
Nap.
Love it. That's such a pregnant woman answer.
Yes.
Number 2, what is one thing on your bucket list that you haven't done yet?
Oh God. I was gonna say go see the Eiffel Tower, but I just did that in November. Bucket list. I guess what is one thing I don't really have a bucket list.
That's okay.
To be honest with you, I don't really have a bucket list because I'm like, I don't know if I'm gonna live tomorrow.
That feels familiar. All right. Number 3, what is your go-to comfort food?
Oh, I snack a lot. I really like Teddy Grahams. But I also have been eating a lot of Lunchables lately. I don't know why. Probably pregnant,
Because
but
you're pregnant.
yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say. All right. Number 4, if you could instantly master any skill, what would it be?
Like a real skill or like a made up one?
Could be anything you want.
Because I feel like I would really enjoy like invisibility if I could master being invisible so that way I could be a fly on the wall. But a real skill, I would say drawing because I love to color, but I can't draw to save my life. Like a stick, I can't even draw a stick person. It's embarrassing. But I would love to be able to be more artistic.
Nice.
There's the word.
All right. And our last question, can you describe yourself in 3 words?
Tired. Tired, outspoken, and brave.
Yeah. I was going to say that for you, but you did it. Thank you so much for coming on the show, for talking to us, sharing your story, running for office, all the things you're doing. It's really amazing. Can you share with our audience where they can find you if they want to follow along with your story and anything you want them to be able to find you at?
Sure. Yeah. Well, if TikTok doesn't get banned on Saturday, I am on TikTok. If you search .Allie.Phillips, or if you just search Allie Phillips, I should pop up. And then I'm also on Instagram, Facebook, Blue Sky, and Threads. Allie, the number 4 TN, is my handle, I think, on most of those. But if you go to Instagram, Allie4TN, I do have a link tree that has all my social medias. So you can find me wherever you guys are.
Awesome.
Awesome.
We will be sure to share all of that in our show notes and on our social media as well. So you all can find and follow Allie. Tove, do you have any last?
No, just, we should do this again sometime and talk again for many hours.
Yeah,
absolutely.
For sure. All right. Well, thank you again for being on the show and everything you're doing. We will be back next week, everyone, with another episode on writing your own story. So have a wonderful week and stay tuned for more.
Thanks so much for listening to We Go Boldly podcast. We know you're busy and we love spending time with you. If
If you enjoyed this week's episode, let us know. Head to Apple Podcasts right now to rate and review our show. While you're there, be sure to click that subscribe button.
Want more us time? Follow us on all the socials at Go Boldly Together.
Want even more us time? As in all the coaching pizzazz. Find us at goboldlyinitiative.com for all the info.
We will be back with more excitement, research, and deep thoughts next week.
Until then, keep on being the bold, brave, amazing people we know you already are.
The Power Moms Network, empowering moms to lift the world.